What is this?
Another one of your attempted coronations.
Thor was a great warrior, and an even greater brother. Though he has disappeared, and likely dead, he shall never be forgotten. I shall strive all my days to take his place as prince and future king.
Loki! You'll pay for this?
Damn.
You turned me into a frog!
Yeah, I remember. I was there. Anything else?
It's funny, for someone born to rule, you sure do lose a lot. Might even say it's in your nature.
You know, things didn't turn out so well for the last person who said that to me.
Enough! I am a god, you dull creature!
Stop trying to be a hero. You're a villain, and you're good at it. Always have been, always will be.
We have one shot at this!
Whatever we do, we're playing God.
What could we have done differently?
Loki Season 2, streaming October 5th, only on Disney+.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Marvel's finally released that Loki versus Frog Thor or Throg deleted scene from Season 1, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. Loki Season 2 premieres next week. My Episode 1 video will post on Friday. We'll do a giveaway in the episode videos for copies of the Loki Blu-ray, so all you have to do to enter that is just be a subscriber and let me know where you want to see Frog, Thor, or Throg come back in future Loki episodes or future movies. Really hoping for a Throg versus Alligator Loki episode. Some of those Loki Season 1 characters will come back, but basically this scene was meant to take place during Episode 1 when Loki's being interrogated by Mobius for that first time, like at the very beginning of the episode after the TVA arrests him and shows him a highlight reel of all the L's that he's taken across all the Marvel movies. The big joke being that at this point in the timeline, this version of Loki, like right after the events of the first Avengers movie, was still really high on himself, even though he just lost hard to the Avengers. So that's why when he first showed up at the TVA, he was shouting at them why he was Loki, the god of mischief, why he would burn the place to the ground, how dare they try to hold him. And Mobius was basically just raking him over the coals like, all right, let's play this back a couple times and see how many times you actually did win. Oh look, it seems like you won about 0 times. And apparently there were a couple of scenes during this highlight reel that he showed of Loki's life up to this point that they deleted, this being one of the biggest ones. There's a big Coulson shout out at the end of that clip too, where Loki says, it didn't go well for the last person that told me it wasn't in my nature.
Funny, for someone born to rule, you sure do lose a lot. Might even say it's in your nature.
You know, things didn't turn out so well for the last person who said that to me.
You're going to lose.
Am I?
It's in your nature.
There's going to be so many questions about Coulson and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., what's canon, what's not canon to all the MCU stuff going forward. It's been happening since Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. debuted in the first place after he died in the Avengers movie. Tahiti, it's a wonderful place. The interesting thing, though, is they actually got Chris Hemsworth to do a bigger cameo scene than what we saw during the actual episode. He did do the grunts for Frog Thor in the jar in the later episodes. I'll talk about that in a second, too. But I know there's lots of people that are wondering if he'd ever come back and cameo in the Loki series. It's always possible that he did during Season 2. I'm not expecting it, though, just based on what the actors said long before Season 1 premiered. It sounds like what they did is they got Chris Hemsworth to come back for Episode 1 for that deleted scene, but then they also had him record dialogue for what they did during Episode 5 with Throg. So in the actual episode we saw, there was a version of Frog Thor in a jar labeled T365 as they're sort of going down into the bunker. You see him trapped between layers of dirt trying to escape from his little jar. You see a full-size version of Mjolnir in a whole bunch of lunch trays. but that was meant to be a reference to the events of Thor issue 365, which was the big Frog Thor story this whole Easter egg is based on, and the basis of Thor's story from Thor Ragnarok about Loki turning him into a frog. That was the whole story that Matt Damon's fake Loki was telling during the play at the beginning of the movie.
I'm a trickster.
Yes, so mischievous.
Sorry about that time I turned you into a frog.
It was a wonderful joke.
It was indeed hilarious.
The joke with Frog Thor in the Void is that it's a version of Thor from those events when they were younger, where Loki never changed him back into his regular form, but instead apparently trapped him in a jar, and then they both got pruned by the TVA and sent to the Void. So basically, this Loki deleted scene of Throg against Loki ruining his coronation took place before the events of all the regular Marvel movies in present day. Like, this predates the events of the first Thor movie. Mobius jokes that it was just one of his many coronation attempts that was foiled. So obviously we saw one during Thor Ragnarok where he basically turned himself into king, and he kind of tried to do that during the first Thor movie too. But apparently, in addition to this deleted scene, he did it many other times too, and a lot of it just pays homage to a lot of the classic Thor comics of Thor versus Loki and him causing all kinds of mischief. You have to remember, in present day, Thor is about 1,500 years old. Loki is pretty close to that age too, so they've had many, many adventures up to present day before the Marvel movies ever pick up. But because the whole thing in the Loki series is dealing with other universes, variants of Loki, different timelines, this is actually meant to be canon to the MCU, what they call the 616 version of Loki for the 616 Marvel comic book universe. That's why we heard the fake Loki and the fake Thor joking about it during the play, because they actually had that adventure where he turned him into a frog briefly. The difference with the Frog Thor in the jar is that's meant to be a variant from another universe, like they caused a Nexus event when Loki put him in the jar and he never escaped. But they had Tom Hiddleston performing his part of the scene separately, like on his own, with some motion capture references, and then spliced it together with the Frog Thor part, because Frog Thor is a pure special effect, just like Alligator Loki. So you have to imagine Tom Hiddleston faking getting pummeled by a tiny little frog and a tiny little hammer. As awesome as that sounds, the reason they said that they deleted the Frog Thor scene is because the early part of this episode 1 with them in the time theater felt like it was dragging on in the edit bay, and they knew that they were going to do the Frog Thor Easter egg later in the Void during episode 5. So technically you can consider that to be a Chris Hemsworth Thor cameo scene, even though it's not exactly what you would expect from a Chris Hemsworth Thor cameo. I think the cooler thing about this, though, is that any other regular director or producer wouldn't have bothered to try and get Chris Hemsworth back just to record a bunch of grunts for a frog trying to get out of a jar. So you have to imagine them pitching it to Chris Hemsworth, like, we're going to bring you back to do this special little scene. It's going to be great, but it's going to be on a planet full of Lokis, and get this, you're going to be Frog Thor.
You son of a bitch! I'm in!
And they didn't pay Chris Hemsworth to do that either. He just came back for free to be a total dude, just helping them out. And because it's just voiceover or grunting, it was really easy for him to do that remotely in Australia where he was while they were filming Loki in the UK. I wasn't really thinking about Chris Hemsworth when I watched the scene the first time, but if you rewatch it now and you listen, you know that it's Chris Hemsworth. It does sound a little bit like Chris Hemsworth grunts. The next big deleted scene they just revealed from episode 5 actually was happening at the end of the episode during the big final battle, so it was going to be them fighting Goliath, but during the deleted scene, all of the Loki variants that were left in the Void were going to rally and help our Loki and Sylvie fight off Goliath, and it was going to be like an all-Loki version of the Avengers Assemble scene from Avengers Endgame, like Loki's Assemble! Which sounds hilarious and amazing at the same time, but the reason they said that that didn't make it into the final episode is because they didn't want it to diminish the triumph of our Loki learning to enchant on the fly and the two of them defeating Goliath by themselves, realizing that they could be much more powerful than anyone gives Loki's credit for. That's what his little speech about classic Loki was when he was creating that perfect illusion of his version of Asgard, down to the trees and the cracks in the streets. He even added the detail of the lightning bolt as a reference to his version of Thor. And our Loki was like, we're stronger than people give us credit for. So as cool as the Loki's Assemble scene would have been, it would have kind of destroyed the weight of that moment. The head of production that designed the look of the Void with all the Easter eggs and all the cool stuff all over the place said that originally it was also going to be way weirder inside the Void. I'm just going to read his quote about it. He said, "We were trying to find moments to infuse the void with surrealism, so that was the point of the giant heads that they were walking around all the time, and also the little void creatures that look like little peacocks." So if it wasn't clear, those weren't meant to be any specific reference. I was trying to find a comic book reference, and a couple people thought that they might have been dodos or something like that, but the way the production designer explains it, they were just meant to be nonsense animals that weren't a direct reference to any specific comic book thing. So he goes on to say, originally at some point I was proposing a far more Salvador Dali-esque, Dada-esque version of the void, and it evolved over time, but those little bird creatures and heads made it through from the Dada-esque version of the English Moors version of the void. If you're not familiar with Salvador Dali, he was this really famous Spanish surrealist artist renowned for his strange art pieces and paintings involving melting clocks, distorted landscapes, Dadaism, which was this really big European avant-garde art movement from the early 20th century that focused on nonsense and irrationality. So originally they were just going to have way more nonsense happening in the void, and it was going to look way trippier. The other big deleted scene that they revealed is actually at the very beginning of the show, at the very beginning of episode 1. It's that Avengers Endgame scene. The director Kate Herron said that because they were building the series off of that moment where Loki escapes in Avengers Endgame, they basically went into the archives where they store all the footage that they filmed, and there were just petabytes of footage that they didn't wind up using for Avengers Endgame. Just a whole bunch of really cool deleted scenes and alternate versions of scenes that we actually saw in the movie. So this whole opening scene with Loki is basically part of just an Avengers Endgame deleted scene. This is her quote about that. She says, "It was a lot of fun. I mean, what a treat as a director, getting access to the library of the rushes of all these other brilliant filmmakers." So basically, they said that they had access to all of the footage from all the Marvel movies that they filmed, but particularly from Avengers Endgame. Then she goes on to say, "That was the really fun thing with the opening, was getting to show that moment everyone knows so well, but from a completely different POV, just because the Russos shot the scene a couple different ways." In related news, you probably just saw in your feeds that Marvel just announced that they were actually starting development on their solo X-Men movie, basically meaning that after they wrap up with Avengers Secret Wars and all that stuff, we're heading into a big X-Men focused phase, like Marvel Phase 7, The Mutant Saga. I'm working on a much bigger video for that'll post tomorrow. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. In my full Loki Season 2 Episode 1 video will post on Friday, so it's going to be awesome. Click here for that Deadpool 3 video to learn about Sabretooth coming back with Wolverine in that movie, and click here for my Ahsoka Episode 8 finale trailer video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.